What's up, YouTube? This is How to Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You can call me RO. We're on chapter 14. This is the sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom, the 13th step towards riches, written here. The 13th principle. This is my affirmation video. So, it's how it goes. The 13th principle is known as the sixth sense, through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate voluntarily without any effort from or demands by the individual. This principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated and understood and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles. The sixth sense is the portion of the subconscious mind which has been referred to as the creative imagination. It has been referred to as the receiving set through which ideas, plans, and thoughts flash into the mind. The flashes are sometimes called hunches or inspirations. The sixth sense defies description. It can't be described to a normal person who has not mastered the other principles of this philosophy, because such a person has no knowledge and no experience with which the sixth sense may be compared. Understanding the sixth sense comes only by meditation through mind development from within. The sixth sense probably is the medium of contact between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence, for the reason it is the mixture of both the mental and the spiritual. It is believed to be the point which man contacts with the universal mind. After you have mastered the principles described in this book, you will be prepared to accept the truth as a statement which may be otherwise be incredible to you. Namely, through the aid of the sixth sense, you will be warned of impending dangers in time to avoid them, and notified of opportunities in time to embrace them. Then comes to your aid and to do your bidding within the development of the sixth sense, a guardian angel who will open you all times to the door of the temple of wisdom. So you must continue to follow the instructions described in the pages of this book, or some similar method of procedure. The author is not a believer in the advocate of miracles, for the reason that he has enough knowledge of nature to understand that nature never deviates from her established laws. Some of her laws are so incomprehensible that they produce what they appear to be miracles. The sixth sense comes as near to being a miracle as anything else ever experienced. And it appears only so because there is no understanding the method by which this principle may be operated. This as much as the author does know that there is a power, or at first cause, an intelligence which permeates every atom of matter and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man, that is infinite intelligence. And it converts acorns into oak trees, causes water to flow downhill in response to the law of gravity, follows night with day and winter with summer, each maintaining its proper place in relationship to the other. The intelligence may, through the principles of this philosophy, be induced to aid in translating desires into concrete or material form. The author has the knowledge because he has experimented with it and experienced it. Step by step through this preceding chapters, you have been led to this, the last principle. Mastering each of the preceding principles, you are now prepared to accept without being skeptical the stupendous claims made here. The claims in this chapter will be made a fact. While passing through the age of hero worship, you have found yourself trying to imitate those who have been most admired. Moreover, discovered that the element of faith with which one has been endeavored to imitate the idols gave as much as a capacity to do so quite successfully. Napoleon Hill has never entirely divested himself in the habit of hero worship, although Napoleon Hill has passed the age commonly given over to such. His experience has taught him that the next best thing to being truly great is to emulate the great by feeling and actions as nearly as possible. Long before Napoleon Hill had ever written a line before publication or endeavored to deliver a speech in public, Napoleon Hill had the habit of reshaping his own character by trying to imitate the 9 men whose lives and works he had most impressed upon him. These 9 men were Emerson, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon, Ford, Carnegie. Every night over a long period of years, Napoleon Hill held an imaginary council with a group of men he called the Invisible Counselors. The procedure was this: Just before going to sleep at night, he would shut his eyes and see in imagination this group of men seated with him around him at the council table. Here he had not only the opportunity to sit among with the men described to be great, but was actually dominated the group by serving as the chairman. Napoleon Hill had a definite purpose in including in his imagination these nightly meetings. His purpose was to rebuild his own character so it would represent a composite of the characters of his imaginary counselors. Realizing as he did early in life that he had to overcome the handicap of birth in an environment of ignorance and superstition, he deliberately assigned himself the task of voluntary rebirth through the method here described. Building character through autosuggestion. Being an earnest student of the psychology, Napoleon Hill knew, of course, that all men become what they are because of their dominating thoughts and desires. Napoleon Hill knew that every deeply seated desire has the effect of causing one to seek outward expression through which desire may be transmuted into reality. Napoleon Hill knew that self-suggestion is a powerful factor in building character, that it is a fact and the sole principle through which character is built. With this knowledge of the principles of mind operation, Napoleon Hill was fairly well armed with the equipment needed in rebuilding his character. In this imaginary council meeting, he called upon his cabinet members for the knowledge he wished to contribute, addressing himself to each member in audible words as follows. Mr. Edison, I deserve from you the marvelous understanding of nature which distinguishes your life. I ask that you make and impress upon my subconscious of whatever qualities you possess which enabled you to understand and adapt yourself to the laws of nature. I ask of you to assist me in reaching and drawing upon whatever success you are available with your knowledge to this end. Mr. Brenberg, I request that you pass on to me the knowledge which enabled you to harmonize the laws of nature that caused you for the cactus to shed its thorns and become edible food. Give me access to the knowledge which enabled you to make 2 blades of grass grow where there no one but grew before, and helped you to blend the coloring of the flowers with splendid harmony, for you alone have successfully gilded the lily. Napoleon, I desired to acquire from you by emulation the marvelous ability you possess to inspire men and to arouse them to greater heights that determine spirit of action. Also to acquire the spirit of enduring faith which enabled you to turn defeat into victory and to surmount staggering obstacles. Emperor Fate, King of Chance, Man of Destiny, I salute you. Mr. Paine, I desire from you to acquire the freedom of thought that gave you the courage and clarity with which you would express your convictions with so much distinguished ability. Mr. Darwin, I wish to acquire from you the marvelous patience and ability to study the cause and effect without bias or prejudice, so exemplified by you in the field of natural science. Mr. Lincoln, I desire to build into my own character the keen sense of justice, the untiring spirit of patience, the sense of humor, the human understanding, and the tolerance which your distinguishing characteristics. Mr. Carnegie, I'm already indebted to you for the choices of my life work, which has brought great happiness and peace of mind. I wish to acquire a thorough understanding of the principles of organized effort, which you use so effectively in the building of a great industrial enterprise. Mr. Ford, you have been among the most helpful of the men who have supplied much material and essential ideas to my work. I wish to acquire the spirit of persistence and determination, poise, and self-confidence which have enabled you to master poverty and organize, unify, and simplify efforts so I might help others to follow in your footsteps. Mr. Edison, I have seated the nearest to me at my right because of this personal cooperation you have given me during my research in the causes of success and failure. I wish to acquire from you the marvelous spirit of faith which uncovered so many of nature's secrets, the spirit of unwavering faith which you used to turn defeat into victory. Napoleon Hill's method of addressing the mind of his members of his imaginary cabinet, in which I was for the moment interested in inquiring. I studied the records of their lives with painstaking care. After some months of this nightly procedure, I was astounded by the discovery that the imaginary figures became apparently real. Each of these 9 men developed individual characteristics which surprised him. For example, Lincoln developed the habit of always being late, then walking around in solemn parade. When he can, he walked very slowly with his hands clasped behind him, and once in a while he would stop and pass and rest his hand on a mountaintop, and he rested it on the mountaintop. Anyways. He always wore this expression on his face. Rarely did he see him smile. The cares of his son and nation made him grave. That was not true of the others. Burbank Payne often indulged in witty imagination, which seemed at times to shock other members of the cabinet. One night, Payne suggested that Hill prepared a lecture on the age of reason and delivered it from the pulpit of a church which he formerly attended. Many around the table laughed heartily at the suggestion. Not Napoleon. He drew his mouth down at the corners of the ground so loudly that it turned and looked at with him with amazement. To him, in church was the power of the state not to be reformed, but to be used as a convenient inciter to mass activity by the people. Excuse me. On one occasion, Burbank was late. When he came home, he was excited with enthusiasm and explained that he had been late because of an experiment he was asking for, through which he hoped to be able to grow apples on any sort of coffee. I think I just want some coffee. Yeah, just going with it. It means something. Be able to grow apples on any sort of tree. Payne added in the reminding that it was the apple which started all the trouble between the man and the woman. Norman chuckled heartily at the suggestion, and Payne should watch out for little serpents when he's in the forest gathering the apples. They have the habit of growing into big snakes. Emerson observed no serpents, no apples, and Napoleon remarked no apples, no state. Lincoln developed the habit of always being last. One of the table, his arms folded, and remained in that position for many minutes to attempt to disturb. No attempt to disturb was made. Finally, he lifted his head slowly, and he got up, walked to the door, then turned around, came back, and put his hand on his shoulder and said, "My boy, you will need much courage if you remain steadfast in carrying out your purpose in life. But remember, when difficulties overtake you, common people have common sense. Adversity will develop it." One evening, Edison arrived ahead of all the others. He walked over and seated himself at the left, where Emerson was accustomed to sit, and said, "You are destined to witness the discovery of the secret of life. When the time comes, you'll observe the fact consists of great swarms of energy, or entities, each as intelligent as human beings think themselves to be. These units of life group together like hives on bees, and remain together until they disintegrate through lack of harmony. These units have difference of opinions, the same as human beings, and often fight among themselves. These meetings which you are conducting will be very helpful to you. They will bring to you the rescue of some unit of life which served the members of your cabinet during their lives. These units are eternal. They never die. You own your thoughts and desires and serve as a magnet which attracts units of life from the great ocean of life out there. Only the friendly units are attracted, the ones which harmonize with the nature of your desires." The other members of the cabinet began to enter the room. Edison got up and slowly walked around to his own seat. Edison was still living when this happened, and impressed Napoleon so greatly that he went to see him and told him about the experience. He smiled broadly and said, "Your dream was more than a reality than we may have imagined it to have been." It's a lot of words. He added no further explanation to this statement. These meetings became so realistic that Napoleon Hill became fearful of the consequences and discontinued them for several months. The experience was so uncanny, he was afraid that he would continue them. He would see a sign or a side of the fact that these meetings were purely experiences of the imagination. Some 6 months after he had discontinued the practice, he was awakened one night when a thought was in his head. When he saw Lincoln standing at the bedside, he said, "The world will soon need your services. It is about to go under a period of chaos, which will cause men and women to lose faith and become panic-stricken. Go ahead with your work and complete your philosophy. That is your mission in life. If you neglect it for any cause whatsoever, you will be reduced to a primal state, and you will be compelled to retrace the cycles through which you have passed during the thousands of years Napoleon Hill was unable to tell the following morning whether he had dreamed this or had actually been awake, and he never since found out which it was, but he does know that it was a dream, and if it were a dream, it was so vivid in the mind the next day that he reassumed the meetings the following night. At our next meeting, the members of the cabinet all filled the room together and stood at their accustomed places at the council table, while Lincoln raised a glass and said, "Gentlemen, let us drink a toast to a friend who has returned to the fold." After that, Hill began to add a new member to the cabinet. Until now, it consists of more than 50 men among Christ, St. Paul, Galileo, Aristotle, Plato, Shakespeare, Bruno, Newton. This is the first time that he had the courage. Moreover, he remained quiet on the subject because he knew from his own attitude in connection with such matters that he would be misunderstood if he had described this unusual experience. Napoleon Hill has reduced the experience to printed page because he is not concerned about what they say than in past. One of the blessings of maturity is that it sometimes brings one greater courage to be truthful regardless of those who do not understand or may think or whatever they have to say, honestly. Lest he be misunderstood, he wishes here a state of most skill that regards the cabinet meetings as being purely imaginary, but he feels the entitlement to suggest that while the members of the cabinet may be purely fictional and the meetings existent only in his own imagination, they have led him glorious paths of adventure, rekindled appreciation of true greatness, encouraged creative endeavor, and embodied the expression of honest thought. Somewhere in the cell structure of the brain is located an organ which receives vibrations of thought ordinarily called hunches. So far, science has discovered there is an organ of the sixth sense and is located, and where it's located, but this is not important. The fact remains that human beings do receive accurate knowledge through sources other than the physical senses. Such knowledge is generally received when the mind is under the influence of extraordinary stimulation. Any emergency which arises through the emotions and causes the heart to beat more rapidly than normal may generally and does bring the sixth sense into action. Anyone who has experienced a near accident while driving knows that such occasions the sixth sense often comes to one's rescue and aids by a split second in avoiding the accident. These facts are mentioned to the statement of the fact which we shall now make, namely, time during the meetings with the invisible counselors. Napoleon Hill found his mind most receptive to ideas, thoughts, and knowledge which reached Napoleon through the sixth sense. He can truthfully say that he owes entirely to the invisible counselors. For credit such ideas, facts, and knowledge as he has discovered it through inspirations on scores of occasions which Napoleon Hill was faced with emergencies, some of them so grave that life was in jeopardy. He was miraculously guided by these difficulties through the influence of the invisible counselors. The original purpose was conducting the council meetings with imaginary beings was solely of that of impressing the subconscious mind through the principle of autosuggestion. With certain characteristics which are destined to be acquired in most recent years, the experimentation has taken on an entirely different trend. Napoleon Hill now goes to the imaginary counselors with every difficult problem which confronts him in the clients. The results are often astonishing through he does not depend entirely upon this form of counsel. You, of course, have recognized that this chapter covers a subject which a majority of people are not familiar. The sixth sense is a subject that will be of great interest and benefit to the person who is to accumulate vast wealth, but it need not claim the attention of those whose desires are more modest. Henry Ford undoubtedly understands and makes practical use of the sixth sense. His vast business and financial operations make it necessary for him to understand and use this principle. The late Thomas A. Edison understood and used the sixth sense in connection with the development, especially involving basic patents in connection with which he had no human experience and no accumulated knowledge to guide him. as was the case with while he was working on the talking machine and the moving picture machine. Nearly all great leaders such as Napoleon, Bismarck, Joan of Arc, Christ, Buddha, Confucius, Muhammad, understood and probably made use of the sixth sense almost continuously. The major portion of their greatness consisted of their knowledge of this principle. The sixth sense is not something that you can take off and put on at will. Ability to use this great power comes slowly through the application of other principles outlined in this book. Seldom does an individual become workable knowledge of the sixth sense. The age of 40, more often, the knowledge is not available until one is past 50. And this is the reason that the spiritual forces with which the sixth sense is so closely related do not mature and become usable except through years of meditation, self-examination, and serious thought. No matter who you are or what you may have been, your purpose in reading this book, you can profit by with it understanding the principles described in this chapter. This is especially true if your major purpose is that of accumulation of money or other material things. The chapter on the sixth sense was included because this book is designed for the purpose of presenting a complete facade. This book is designed for the purpose of presenting a complete philosophy by which individuals may unerringly guide themselves in attaining whatever they ask of life. The starting point of all achievement is desire. The finishing point is that brain of knowledge which leads to understanding of self, understanding of others, understanding of the laws of nature, recognition and understanding of happiness. This sort of understanding comes in its fullness only through familiarity with the use of the principle of the sixth sense. Hence, the principle has to be included as a part of this philosophy for the benefit of those who demand more than money. Having read the chapter, you must be observed that while reading it, you are lifted to a high level of mental stimulation. Splendid. Come back to this a month from now and read it once more and observe that your mind will still sooner go to a higher level of mental stimulation. Repeat this experience from time to time, giving no concern as much how little learn at a time, and eventually you will find yourself in possession of a power that will enable you to throw off discouragement, master fear, overcome procrastination, and draw freely upon your imagination. Then you will have felt that unknown something, that which been the moving spirit of every true nature, great thinker, leader, artist, musician, writer, or statesman. Then you will be in position to transmute your desires into physical or financial counterpart as easily as you may lay down and quit at the first sign of opposition. Faith versus fear. Previous chapters have described how to develop faith through autosuggestion, desire in the subconscious mind. The next chapter presents detailed instructions for the mastery of fear. Here will be found a full description of the 6 fears which are cause of all discouragement and procrastination, indifference, indecision, and the lack of ambition, self-reliance, initiative, self-control, and enthusiasm. Search yourself carefully as you study these 6 enemies, as they may exist in your subconscious mind, where the present will be hard to detect. Remember too, as you analyze the 6 ghosts of fear, that they are nothing but ghosts, because they exist only in one's mind. Remember also that the ghost creations of uncontrolled imagination have caused most of the damage to people done in their own minds. Therefore, ghosts can be as dangerous as if they lived and walked on the earth in physical bodies. The ghost of fear of poverty, which seized the minds of millions of people in 1929, was so real that it caused the worst business oppression this country has ever known. Moreover, this particular ghost still frightens some of us to our wits. Well, that was chapter 14. The sixth sense, the door to the temple of wisdom, the 13th step towards riches, how to think and grow rich by Napoleon Hill. I penned it here. Hope you listened, and thank you so much.